It began with an impossible question. How could a nation with barely a few thousand outdated planes rise, almost overnight, to command the skies with the largest air force the world had ever seen? In 1939, the United States Army Air Corps ranked 17th in global air power, smaller than that of Italy, even smaller than Poland's. 3 years later, by 1942, it was producing thousands of aircraft a month, from nimble fighters to giant bombers that could cross oceans. Factories that once built refrigerators and cars were churning out wings and engines. Teenagers who had never seen an airplane were becoming pilots, mechanics, and navigators. And by the war's end, the sky itself seemed filled with the roar of American engines. This is the story of how the United States, through sheer determination, organization, and human ingenuity, built the world's largest air force in just 3 years. At the dawn of the 1930s, aviation was still in its infancy. The United States military treated airplanes as little more than scouts, tools to observe the battlefield, not dominate it. Funding was scarce, and innovation moved slowly. Then, in 1939, the illusion of peace shattered. The fall of Poland, the speed of the Blitzkrieg, and the sight of Europe consumed by war sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. American military leaders realized something grim. If war ever reached them, their current air fleet, around 2,500 planes, many already obsolete, would stand no chance. President Franklin D. Roosevelt understood what was at stake. In May 1940, he stood before Congress and made a daring declaration. The United States, he said, must build 50,000 airplanes a year. It was a number so huge that even his closest advisors thought it was unrealistic, a fantasy. But Roosevelt was not speaking to his generals that day. He was speaking to the American people. Factories, he promised, would awaken. The industrial might of the nation would turn toward the skies. And so, the arsenal of democracy was born. What followed was not just a military expansion. It was an industrial revolution. Across the country, entire cities transformed overnight. Detroit, home of the automobile, became the beating heart of aircraft production. Companies that had never built a plane suddenly found themselves at the center of a new kind of race, not for profit, but for survival. Ford Motor Company, famous for the Model T, took on a challenge unlike anything before. In 1942, it opened the Willow Run plant in Michigan, a factory so vast that it had its own fire department, its own power station, even its own airport. At full capacity, Willow Run produced a brand new B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. Over 8,000 of them rolled off its assembly lines, each one a flying fortress of metal, wires, and courage. Across the country, Boeing expanded its Seattle facilities to build the B-17 Flying Fortress and later the B-29 Super Fortress, the most advanced bomber of its time. Douglas and North American churned out fighters like the P-51 Mustang and the P-38 Lightning. But airplanes alone do not make an air force. To fly them, you needed people. And to find them, the U.S. turned to its citizens. Young men from farms, cities, and small towns across America lined up at recruitment centers. They came not as seasoned aviators, but as dreamers, students, mechanics, clerks, all willing to take to the skies for something larger than themselves. Training centers sprang up across the country, in Arizona, Texas, California, and beyond. The Army Air Forces established programs so vast they rivaled entire universities. In just 3 years, more than 193,000 pilots were trained, along with hundreds of thousands of navigators, bombardiers, gunners, and ground crews. But the challenge was bigger than just numbers. Air warfare was still new, untested on such a massive scale.
Every mission demanded not only skill, but coordination, precision, and trust. That's when the U.S. began pioneering something revolutionary: the system of air power. No longer would aircraft operate as isolated units. Instead, they would fight as part of an enormous, synchronized machine. Bombers protected by fighters, reconnaissance guiding strategy, transport planes supplying entire armies. This was the birth of modern air strategy, and it required not just pilots, but mathematicians, meteorologists, and engineers, working in unison. While production soared, something remarkable was happening on the home front. The face of the American workforce was changing. Millions of men went overseas, and women stepped into their places. Rosie the Riveter wasn't just a poster, she was a reality. By 1943, 1/3 of the American aviation workforce was female. They riveted wings, tested engines, inspected instruments, and proved that determination knew no gender. At the Douglas Aircraft Plant in California, more than 40% of employees were women. In Kansas, Black Americans who had long been shut out of many industries found opportunities in aviation manufacturing and the armed forces. For the first time, the nation's industrial power became a true reflection of its people, united under one cause. And the results were staggering. By 1941, U.S. factories produced 19,000 aircraft. By 1942, 47,000. By 1943, more than 85,000. Every hour, somewhere in America, new aircraft took flight, each one carrying the hopes of those who built it. As production surged, so did innovation. American engineers designed planes faster than ever before, often improving existing models within months. The Lockheed P-38 introduced turbo superchargers for high-altitude performance. The P-51 Mustang's addition of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine gave it unmatched range and power. And then came the B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced bomber of the war, equipped with pressurized cabins, remote-controlled turrets, and radar-guided navigation. It was a flying laboratory, the pinnacle of American engineering. But all of this progress came with enormous logistical challenges. Planes had to be shipped, maintained, and fueled across vast oceans. The U.S. built an entire global network of bases, depots, and air routes, stretching from California to India, from Alaska to Australia. What had begun as a small, underfunded Air Corps was now a vast, interconnected force, the Army Air Forces, spanning continents and skies. And in just 3 years, the United States had built not only the world's largest air force, but the blueprint for modern air power itself. The climax of this transformation came not in a single battle, but in a realization that air power had changed the very nature of war. The ability to project force across oceans, to move troops and supplies by air, to support ground operations with precision and speed, it all stemmed from that rapid 3-year revolution. Generals like Henry Hap Arnold understood it best. He once said, "We have got to get it into our heads that the real front line today is in the air." By 1944, the U.S. Army Air Forces had more than 2 million personnel and nearly 80,000 operational aircraft. No nation in history had ever assembled such a fleet in such a short time. But it wasn't just about machines. It was about what those machines represented. Every airplane carried within it thousands of stories. The hands that built it, the minds that designed it, and the hearts that believed in it. When the war finally ended, the United States emerged not only victorious, but transformed. Its Air Force, soon to become an independent branch in 1947, stood as a symbol of industrial strength and collective willpower. The lessons learned during those 3 years went on to shape the Cold War, space exploration, and even the commercial aviation industry that followed. Jet engines, radar systems, pressurized cabins, all born from that era of relentless innovation. The world had entered the age of flight. Looking back, it's hard to imagine that it all began with a few scattered hangars, a handful of outdated planes, and a vision that many said was impossible. But the story of how the United States built the world's largest air force in just 3 years isn't just about technology or war. It's about belief in progress, in teamwork, and in the human capacity to rise when the world demands it most. Because behind every roaring engine, behind every silver wing that touched the clouds, was something far greater than machinery. It was the spirit of a nation learning to fly.